multi access was fine. Hello. Hiyo. Oh. Yeah. And
Who's done?
Easy to remember. MVP.
hmm.
I don't know who. That's probably Bram dancing.
I can never stay still in here. I have to be moving the whole time. I don't know why. Yeah, I just like the feeling of moving, you know?
Indeed.
This is so weird.
How we seem to form larger circles. Like the larger the group, you just form a larger circle rather than multiple smaller circles.
Ooh.
Is
Yeah,
this
true.
where we invite people to dance in the middle?
That's a great idea.
I don't
there
know how
any-
to dance though.
Are there built-in dances?
Okay, I can't.
That would be.
Oh, who's
That's a
doing
great
that? Those
idea.
are good moves.
So have you ever used Verbella?
Yes.
No.
Have you?
Yeah, I've
I've
used
got a-
it a lot actually. It's got good and bad points, but they do have lots of built-in dance moves. built in.
They do. Yeah, you can do a. You can even do a flip, can't you?
Yeah, you can do a flip. There's salsa. There's a whole bunch of different dance moves you can do.
The other thing I
I'm
like
trying to
with
get out
Verbella
of
is the
this
handshake,
Yeah.
and I think you can also do fist bump, can't you?
Yeah, it's pretty good. So I've used it for pretty large conferences, which is what my questions about scalability about Odyssey is about big conferences. So 500 people,
Okay.
1,000 people, something like that.
How large of an audience have you done with Verbella?
It's pretty scalable. I think they've done 3,500. But I've only been in maybe 200, 100 to 200, something like that, in one room.
Got it.
But yeah,
Did somebody just say it's dark in here?
Yeah, that's kind of strange.
they haven't really made any huge changes lately. So, and they do have headset support. So I've used it in a Quest 2 for a while.
Okay.
And so you can actually have your hands. So that's really good. So you can do the gesturing is much better when you have a headset when they work.
On that note, have you used Glue with the hand tracking?
Used what?
Glue.
No, I haven't. What's Glue?
Okay. They're HMD only,
Okay.
but similar to Verbella, that I asked because Glue has really cool hand tracking support. I like
really?
that functionality quite a bit. Yeah.
GLUE?
GLUE. Yeah. Have you tried Verbella's other product, Frame?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's got possibilities, but it seems a lot more immature right now,
Okay.
I guess.
It has a lot of like creator functionality, doesn't it?
Yeah,
can
that's
build your
right.
own environment.
Yeah, like Second Life. It's got some Second Life-ish.
Yeah, usually people wearing the grey pants and the black shirt haven't completed their avatar setup yet.
So they're just using the default skin. Okay.
Yeah, basically. Although sometimes they just skip the avatar creation and that's what it defaults you to.
No, I was
Black shirt, grey legs.
I see. Yeah. I might actually have to go to the big space now. Yeah. Will it be here? Just stand by and see if there's any stragglers coming through? Or
Yeah, I can wait here, that's fine.
okay. Thanks. Cool. Everyone comfortable on Odyssey? Yeah.
Just chilling in the big circle.
Yeah.
And by chilling, I mean
Started
apparently doing
shortly,
hokey.
so
My screen's just gone black. Is that just because it's not loading the content, or
might be.
okay?
What
It was there before.
did it was there and now it's black? You might
It's just gone
try.
black. Yeah, I can see you guys all at the top still.
You might try starting a fresh tab.
Yeah, it is a new tab, fresh, and I've just restarted. I was having internet problems, so I don't know if it's related to that because it was very blurry.
Do you have anything on your browser that would be blocking WebRTC, like an ad blocker or anything?
No, because I guess I could see it, so
Ah.
I could. Yeah, I've refreshed a couple of times already. I just haven't seen this black screen before. I mean, I can see and hear you guys, but not the avatars in the space that we were in the dancing circle.
Oh man, I don't want you to miss the dance.
Someone probably kicked me out of the circle. This makes sense.
You might actually be able to just without opening a new tab, just refreshing your current tab might restart WebRTC.
Okay, I'll try.
Sounds like
If I
your
drop off-
WebRTC was, yeah.
Yeah, no. Okay, I'll just try.
Has everybody figured out that you can double click on the ground to walk as well as using your WASD keys?
Yeah, I figured that out as last night when I was playing around with it.
But then I can't do my side-to-side wiggle as I walk.
I know, but then you can walk backwards, which is equally as cool because you can, you know, you got like the real cool dance moves.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
You can also do like the canter, or wait, I think that's called the grapevine, you know, side to side.
Hmm. You know, where'd Sam go? Not one yet. Yeah, this.
Sit on the stage.
Oh.
Hmm?
Hey, it's Sam.
Hi.
Is it visible now?
Yeah. Let's see how it goes. I gotta turn the right way.
Okay.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, we can
I'm just
start
not gonna
going
touch
to
anything.
the main area now.
Just out of curiosity, Sam, what is your frame rate at right now? You can check in that top left-hand corner.
59.
Okay. So yeah, you seem to be streaming WebRTC fine.
Hmm.
It's better now than it was before, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
All right, Sam's having some technical issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that. Is it just Sam or I think like other people as well?
I think it's just Sam.
Yeah.
She's gonna try a different browser.
Yeah.
Um,
I think I had the same issue as well, and yeah, the solution was just switching away from Chrome, because Firefox and Edge didn't have that issue when it was streaming Odyssey.
yeah, I'm on Brave and it's working okay, but yeah. Which is still a Chromium-based browser, so.
Yeah, it's kind of strange that it happens though.
Sam,
Yay!
Fingers crossed.
Oh yeah, perfect.
I think somebody's in Sam's seat.
Yeah, it looks like that. Just gonna have to kick him out.
I think that's me. I don't know how to get out of it.
Oh, just double click on the ground.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
Ta-da!
Sam, I think if you double click on the chair or just click on the
sure,
chair,
okay. Sorry, I
it
was
should
like,
jump you
someone's in
into
my
it.
spot, maybe, but
So I mean, if you want the left chair, I can bail.
sorry, I just stole it. No, I'm all good. Just
Okay.
don't sit down. You'll be sitting on my lap, whoever it is in front of me.
Wait, what? What?
Someone. That's good.
When geoclipping goes wrong.
I feel like I'm failing at the metaverse already.
No, that's not how this works. The metaverse fails you. This is really.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Everything working now, Sam? How's the video?
Yeah, I mean, so far all good.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, after a few trials and tribulations there, welcome everyone to the Auckland Game Dev Meetup. So this is the very first virtual meetup that's using this platform called Odyssey. Hope you guys actually enjoyed the first 20 or so minutes of gameplay there, but so now we're more than ready for the main event. So I have with me James Everett of NZXR and Sam Ramlu of Method of M Theory and Method Digital, and we're gonna be having a nice fireside chat about the metaverse. A couple of rules before we start. If you have any questions, save that at the end of the talk. And if you have any announcements or anything you'd like to shout out, feel free to do so once we're in Q&A. Cool. So let's get started. Um, James, I actually was mentioning it on our discussions, but I think the best way to start this would be, what exactly is the metaverse?
Oh dear. I mean, so the metaverse is the, it's a term coined by Neil Stephenson in Snow Crash in 1992. It's a term that has popped up ever since as sort of like a thing that people have wanted to build different versions of. And now it's in its sort of most recent incarnation, people are talking about it primarily in the sense of virtual spaces. But when I think about it, I often, and like in my NZGDC talk, I had a slide that was just if anyone remembers the information superhighway, right? That was a term for the internet. The metaverse is that. It is a term for whatever the evolution of the internet is, right? With all the open standards, collection of things, and eventually we'll get to a point where we've got a lot more interoperability between both 3D and 2D standards and all the rest of it. But it is this weird amorphous blob of the ever-evolving technology set that we find ourselves in. So I don't put a lot of stock in it as a term. I think it's just sort of like, yep, we're continuing to evolve the internet. Because when I started on the internet a very long time ago, Usenet was the most cutting edge thing, and that was purely text based. And then we got graphical browsers and etc. So yeah, it's just the evolution of the internet. And somebody's got some serious background like vacuum noise going on. I don't know what's happening there, but please let me. But anyways, yeah, yep. So Josh, I guess you've got a bit of a little bit of background noise, but that's okay. We can do the in and out. Anyway, so that's my take on it. People are posting about having some problems on Meetup. maybe somebody can give them a bit of
Yeah, I'm actually checking
tech
that
support
now.
there.
Yeah.
But Sam, what's your take on it while I busy throw cold water on the excitement?
No, look, I mean, I agree. Maybe wouldn't have said it so eloquently, but essentially it's the next stage I see of taking this thing called the internet, and it's interesting, I guess, over the hundreds of years that I've been using the internet. Because again, I was there right kind of when it started and became popular, I suppose, in its most recent form. But there were spaces that you could go to, right? It was different. But I feel like this is probably the most easiest way to coin it, is virtual spaces where you can do everything that you do on the internet, or what you might be able to do in your real world, but in a an online way. I mean, it's all online, right? But I think also there's also different people's opinions and thoughts around what this looks like for them and what they might be able to do, just as the internet is, so we're still defining that. It's been defined by a few people, but I think part of that is also what they kind of their thoughts on what this could be, and so they've kind of said this is what it means to them, and I think there's just potentially not enough voices speaking on it to kind of expand on exactly what all of that is. But on the whole, I think it'll be interesting to see how it develops over time, just as the internet did. It started off one way and then developed down a certain way. So we've got a bit of a framework, because we've had that working for a while, that we can just kind of go, yep, let's pick this up and put this here. But we are in a slightly different space. So what does that mean for this medium? How do we adapt to this medium? How do we change what we do, the behaviors? Even just now, as we're all getting used to this space, that's part of it, right? It's different. We've become used to video format for this sort of, and how do we change across to something like this? Is that a good roundabout answer?
Seems
I
like
think
it,
so.
yeah.
So I mean, I think you and I are agreeing with each other.
James, I don't know how many times we could, yeah. I mean, I think the thing that would be interesting to unpack today, I do have a lot of feelings and thoughts about the space, as I do about the internet, and access, and who's sort of, and I will say it, who's controlling it, because there is a sense of that. Yeah, and that would be interesting. I mean, that we probably don't have enough time in the world to talk about that, but those are probably some of the things we might go into, right, James?
I would think so. Josh probably has an agenda to try and keep us on. So
Oh
what
yeah,
you got?
Josh, sorry.
Not really. Yeah, but not really. I'm open to anything, and I do agree that as I was researching the metaverse for the past week or so, it is just essentially a next step toward next evolution of the internet. And I was actually watching Zuckerberg's talk about it in Facebook Connect, and that's basically the same terms that they've been using: interoperability, just interconnectedness across all other APIs and apps, and that's just a technical standpoint though. But then comes like the question though, is like who would be? Is it now more like an arms race per se? Or is it the new form of arms race, I guess, to be like the one to lead the metaverse per se, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just on a slightly separate point, but coming back to what you're talking about, Josh, is that also we've got to a point now where the technology is at a space where we can do this, So it was really interesting in the game Slack channel. Someone had mentioned, and I just found this really fascinating, was that their link to the metaverse was through Meta. And I think we're going to get that. And this is within our space, and we probably know a little bit more within the space than the general public. But, in terms of Facebook owning that, it'll be really interesting the stand they're putting down and what everyone's going to think is essentially their terminology, whereas it's been around for a long time, right? And I think, you know, again, watching that keynote and hearing about it, it's interesting in that they're coming out and saying that they want to enable others to come and share in the space, but also very much putting a stake in the ground and calling it Meta. There is a sense of ownership there. And I think, look, this is where I think conversations over the next, you know, however many months, years is going to get really interesting about how that space is managed. And yeah, sorry, I'm kind of just rambling, but James, feel free to jump in.
No, you're on the money, right? Like they said interoperable, open, shared
Yeah.
spaces, inviting people in, right? There's a lot of that kind of language happening. Historically, that's not been the case with Facebook, Meta, or Meta, Facebook. You know, like they have historically not done that, and you know, proof is in the pudding of whether they,
Yeah.
you know, will they go that direction or not. You know, they're verbally saying it. It's fascinating to see a company that is got someone leading it that is able to decide to just fully commit to something like this to the tune of, you know, $10+ billion and
Yeah.
literally tens of thousands of people. So whether they end up, you know, being a leader, well, by dint of just amount of resource applied, they will become a leader in the
By
space
default,
because
right? Yeah. Almost
precisely.
yeah.
And so whether they are really open or not it will remains to be seen. There's a lot of other, obviously, like as we look at the metaverse more broadly and the internet more broadly, it's sort of, you know, the thing about the internet, the thing that's accelerated the growth of the internet over the years is that it is interoperable and open. So you can go and build your thing and other people can talk to that thing and use that thing. And it's that network effect which has made it the engine of growth that it is. But that being said, like my experience of the internet has changed dramatically over the years. You know, like I say, I refer to, you know, like Usenet and the early graphical web browsers. Like as those things began to crop up, you know, I was part of, we would have link rolls, right? So it's like we would have a banner on, you put a banner on your website that had it was basically advertising somebody else's website, and you would basically get involved right in these link rolls. So you'd have like 20 or 30 people who you knew online, or some of whom you knew in person. And every time someone refreshed your webpage, they would see a new banner would pop up to link them to someone else. And that was a method of discoverability way back when. And then, you know, Yahoo was a portal to the internet, and it was an aggregator of links. And then search came along, right? And all of these changes that we've seen over time, as open as things have been, they have gradually begun to funnel down. Like Facebook as a platform, Google as a platform, Twitter, any of the large platform holders, for some people, that is the internet, right? There is an entire swath of users online who Facebook is the internet to them, which is wild to me. But that's the nature of the beast, and this is going to continue to evolve. And so if we look at people, you know, saying, okay, well, we're going to go into these more immersive spaces, we're going to use 3D technologies and whatnot, try and beam people into these kinds of spaces. Early on, it's going to be highly proprietary generally, because that's where you can kind of make accelerate change the most quickly, is when you don't have to deal with other people, right? You can go real fast if you don't have to worry about interoperable standards with everybody else, because you can just commit to your standards. The more open you want to be, the more work there is to get there. Like the Oculus headsets got more closed over time, and by pouring enormous amount of resources in there, they were able to get to what's arguably probably like a ridiculously good piece of kit, especially at a subsidized price point. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, talking around myself here, but it's going to be a place like the internet is going to continue to evolve, and as it evolves, how we choose, like where we choose to spend our time, both as users of these spaces and as developers. So what are we choosing to develop, and whose platforms are we choosing to develop on? Who are we choosing to support? Because you can build the coolest looking monolith, but if there's nothing to do there, nobody's going to stick around, right? Content remains king. So, for us as game developers, we are very, very aware of this. And it's also the power, I guess, that we have in this very imbalanced relationship. We do not have billions of dollars and tens of thousands of people to throw at something. But what we do have is the ability to create experiences that nobody else can. And by choosing where we make those experiences and where we make them available, that's where we can have influence.
Yeah, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the power, because I think that to me feels like something that, again, by default, the last couple of decades, I guess, has been essentially grooming a few companies ready for this space, and in a way that disparity between everyone else who might be able to start in the space at this level, at the Facebook Meta level, there's already people who can jump on this and create these spaces, again, with the sort of money that Facebook Meta are throwing at it, which does mean that there's disparity in there. I mean, and they've placed themselves over the years in this space, so they're automatically leading it, or what they'll be seen as leading the space. And then what does that mean, for the others? And then also accessibility and how that works for people. Already we have that disparity, and how is that going to change over time? There's so I think there's just a lot in there that in a way they can only get bigger and bigger. What does it mean for some other players who might want to do something different? Essentially, whether we like it or not, a lot of this is going to be built around one company or a select few companies' visions, So how can we all add to that? What can be done to kind of make sure that other voices are being added to that?
Yeah, there's, because it happens at a few levels, right?
Yeah.
Like there's the technology platform side, and arguably like OpenXR, which Facebook has made, or Meta has made a commitment to, is cool, and people can build in that space. But the challenge, it's, as someone who's used a lot of open source software over the years, one of the great challenges of open source software is that it is often done by passionate people in their spare time.
Yeah.
And a passionate person in their spare time cannot outrun a multi-billion-dollar or a trillion-dollar company. It's just not feasible. And the access to tools and whatnot, as you say, it's the learning curve to approach these things. It was sort of like, it was weird. Like when, my gosh, I keep sounding like old man yells at cloud here, but when I started with graphical web browser stuff, like HTML was dead simple. I taught myself HTML by just inspecting the source of other people's websites, right?
Yeah.
That was how I learned the forbidden code for the blink tag. And you could, that was how you learn this stuff. So I could, in Notepad, I could make a website. And the hardest problem for me was, where do I host this thing? That was one of the big challenges. Over time, it became easier to do that stuff. And then in games as well, it's like, making a level in Doom or Warcraft 2 was relatively simple because the tools were lower fidelity, which meant the time to learn how to use them was much quicker. And then over time, as those tools got more complex and more robust, it took, the learning curve got steeper. Unity tries to open things up and make them easier in some ways. Unreal does a really amazing job with the samples around blueprints and stuff like that. But those are not exactly what I would call approachable platforms to the everyday person, right? It's quite different. So we go through, it's the usual technology cycle. If we go through the waves of increasing capability and complexity, and then simplifying the complexity out so that we've got the same capability but with less complexity, and we kind of go through that wave and that ramp. And these spaces, if they're going to be, the question that I always get people to think about because we do a lot of our work, in augmented reality and whatnot, people immediately think about how they're translating the a particular real world experience they want to have, and they're like, cool, I could do this virtually. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
What is it about this that is better
Yeah.
done virtually than it is done physically or with a 2D interface, right? If what you want to do is like browse a store, it's if this whole space was like full of shelves and we were like walking around to like look at things we wanted to buy versus like, oh, I can just like bring up a web page and away we go.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, right. So it's like, what are we doing with these spaces and why is always is a critical question, I think. So it begs the, you know, as if we say that it is imperative that we have these 3D environments and yada, 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 like are the tools accessible to everyone? Are they locked down? Are they difficult to use? Do they require you to have a really high-end computer, which means, you know, someone who does not have that economic privilege means that now they're locked out of these spaces. And I think it's that form of accessibility, along with, you know, all of the other accessibility concerns that need to be, I think, front and center for people. It's that level of accessibility where it's like people can get left behind, you know, and we see that already with the internet, right? The digital divide of like, if, you know, it's way easier for companies and governments to have websites than it is to have offices with people. So if you need to fill out a form to get your driver's license or access medical services or whatever, it is much more in the, like, it's a lot easier for them if they're like, yeah, there's a form on a website. If I can't get at the form on the website, I am now disadvantaged.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's why we still have a lot of physical access to services. And this exacerbates this thing, right? You've got all these people who are who have, for lack of a better term, but one form of it, like economic privilege and the access to technology to get into these spaces, and they're like, cool, we're making this whole new economy and millions of dollars and doing this whole thing, and people without that access are stuck looking at going, well, that sure sounds cool. It's like, yeah, you've just created this gnarly inequitable system, which
and we've added to, or not us necessarily, but there's been another place that is suddenly not accessible, and I think COVID brought a lot of that around in terms of the digital divide, definitely across Aotearoa and across the world, is what was available to kids wanting to learn online. What does this mean for people as well, and then there's a knowledge and understanding disparity as well, right? Of a lot of people who don't understand some of these spaces, who have that fear factor of it. Are they being left behind? Are they being left out? And in a way, I think we all pride ourselves, especially in the space, as being pioneers and being ahead of the curve and doing that. But actually, what does that mean long term if what we're creating is even bigger gap? I'm not saying we're here, we're not here to solve any of those, but just brings up some of those questions, right? And then I think about it from a content creator's point of view. And I think, from how we've gotten into this industry, into AR and VR, probably quite early on. And interestingly, I can see kind of both sides of it. One, we're geared really well to understand the space and to probably dive into it quicker than maybe others. But what that also means is that having been in the space for a while, you also, sometimes you can be a bit... you know what you know, and so you kind of go down that track. So sometimes also people coming in fresh with new ideas can look at this as a completely different thing and go, actually, why hasn't this been done in this space? And so I think there's a few different ways here. It'll be interesting to explore how people coming into this industry, into this area, starting to build content and look at it, will start to figure out if there are new ways we can access stuff, if there's new ways to display and share content. I think definitely one thing for me is I feel like there's this responsibility as a content creator, and I think this goes across everyone, but how we take that responsibility and the sort of content we create for people to start to access through this, what this looks like is kind of up to those content creators. If we've got access to come in and do that, the metaverse can be what we make it. And what is that? What does that look like? What's our responsibility for certain things in here, for certain pieces of content, how people interact with content, who's allowed access, and and how do you determine that? What does it now turn into when I can, be any avatar? Some of you might not know what I really look like, or I mean, all of that sort of stuff. And I guess this is all the problems that we had with the internet and all the issues and ethics that came up with that, and maybe more, adding to that and surmounting all those issues going forward. So I find that interesting, I think, as well, is what are those pieces of content, what's that going to be? And games is very much going to be one of the first kind of areas that people start to look at, and how we can do that. But also, interestingly, how much of sort of, if you go to straight virtual spaces, how much of that has already been done in games?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of, we've got heaps of examples of it, already. And then, and Rob's mentioning in chat, like Second Life, for example, and Second Life is still surviving. It's still there. It's still functioning. It's significantly diminished, I think, from maybe what it was at one time. But it's, Ralph Koster, who's a game designer who's been around for yonks, and he started out in the mud and mush era, and then Ultima Online and other things now. He's been writing a really interesting series of posts from his new company, the perspective that they have. The company's called Playable Worlds, and I can find a link and chuck it in here. And about once a week, he's dropping knowledge and talking about how these things function at both a design and a technical level, and also a social level. And there is, and he's fond of, and I think for good reason, of waving the flag and going, we've been here before, right? So all of the things around community management best practices, around how virtual communities are organized, how they will self-organize, and how they can be assisted or destroyed or diminished by things that happen. There's literally decades of examples to look back at. And so there's a lot of, I see a lot of people going like, we're doing this thing for the first time, and it's just like, no. It's ultimately it's all just people, right? Like it's people and people doing things, and it turns out that culture, as Rob says, laws, economics, all of those things, we've got thousands of years of examples of that. We have decades of examples in online spaces, and the thing that I think has often frustrated me in a lot of social spaces, not least of which, the major social media platforms, is that you can have a terms of service that says, hate speech is disallowed, etc. If you refuse to enforce that terms of service, then you determine what community is created. And when you look at really healthy, online game communities or online communities of any kind, or in-person communities, when you look at healthy communities, those are communities where boundaries are well established, well understood, and well, for lack of a better term, well policed or well maintained. And so every time people are just like, we're just going to open the doors and we'll figure it out, I'm like, I know what's going to happen. You are going to end up with a small group of toxic people, and that toxicity will spread. It is a virus. It is a cancer. And if you don't manage and maintain the community and create the kind of community that you want to see, for individuals, they have no power, right? That is a systemic failure. And so when we look at all of these upcoming, sort of new platforms like this, like you noticed, Sam, when we were just before we came up to the stage here, right? Like someone stepped, you stepped close to me, or someone stepped close to you or something, and like their avatar immediately took a step back. That's a skeuomorphic acknowledgement of space, which is really cool and interesting, which has a whole series of, we could ask Reed about this later. I'm very curious, because there's a lot of ways that things like that, which seem quite simple on the surface, can become tools for griefing, right? If I can walk into someone's bubble and push them backwards, and I can continue to do so, I can shove someone to a corner and bully them, right? If there's a few of the VR apps and VR chat, I think, and a few others have got systems whereby you can set yourself a virtual bubble to say anyone stepping inside of this bubble disappears, or I can't see them, or they can't see me, and whatnot. So like the ability to create physical privacy is embedded in the platform. So all of those choices those are choices as that we make as creators and designers and developers, right? And I think it's incredibly important that we be very, very conscious about the choices that we're making.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's the thing is, there is, as there is on the internet, there's all sorts of content, all sorts of areas that you can fall down into, and I guess I'm always just thinking about what does that mean, and of course I'm thinking about the future generation, and the sort of the current social interactions we have, how they've changed immensely through social networks. What does that mean going forward um, when the what's been kind of showcased as benefits is you can meet your friends online even more and do things with them online, and how that starts to change our communities, our humanity, and that sort of stuff, where if you're growing up and that's what and that's all that's how you'll be, right? And so what does that mean, like, in terms of missing out on, as it is, we have issues with people spending more time online, engaging with people than they do in person, and the anxiety issues that are coming through from that. And so, very much I've gone down the mental health kind of path here, but I guess with a young son and thinking about what his world will look like, he will know nothing different. This will be part of his world, inherent. So what does that mean for him? And then of course things like, James, I mean, I'm sure being in the space, with VR and AR and across the board, like, some of the first things was that whole, how can we replace this experience? As you said, like, how can we replace that real world experience with this? Travel was mentioned quite a lot, right? And this idea that we can now virtually travel instead of, and there are sustainability links to that in a positive way of being able to do this virtually. But then you kind of go, well, hang on, does that mean that no one actually gets to travel? And what does that mean for us as human beings? And does it matter if you created a space that was so real that you felt like you were there? How do you feel about not traveling? If you've never traveled before and you don't know, what difference does it make? And I guess it just opens up all these questions. We're probably getting a little bit too philosophical here, but to me, I feel like these are the sort of questions that always opens up to me. Replace your everyday this with doing this in the metaverse. We have to create these safe spaces. We have to be responsible content creators. But also on the other side, there's a lot of fun to be had within this, right? We've probably gone down more of a serious route, but there is a lot of fun to be had. I think it's just that balance again of how we balance that and still retain our humanness within this.
Yeah, and sort of, well, not sort of, direct tangent from that, but I'm going to turn off my video because I realize I'm the only person with a video up in the bubble, which is like, I'm the only non-fully virtual person. So what happens if I do
Okay.
this? Hey, Rob.
Rob's.
No, so Rob, I appreciate that, but it's interesting, right? Like, even with that video feed running up there, that draws my eye because it's
Yeah.
naturally, it's a mirror of me, and so it's moving more, and so that draws my eye more than the space around. But I guess the advantage to that is that if I saw everybody's video feeds, I'd have a sense of degree of engagement. Right now, well, the zombie brigade is staring us down, and it's a little intimidating.
Yes, I have no idea if anyone's enjoying this or
yeah.
It's so
If everybody does a boogie, is it cool?
Someone's dancing
yeah.
now. It's like, okay, you're
There we
enjoying
go.
it.
Yeah. Josh, where are we at in your agenda, mate? Because I feel like we are, Sam and I could probably do this forever. So is there anything particular on the list that we haven't covered, or that you would like us to get into?
Have we just put everyone off the metaverse and just gone down like this? I feel like James and I are always on the same page about some of this stuff, but
Yeah. But I do agree. There's a huge amount of fun to be had, and we can talk about fun. But before we go down another rabbit hole, Josh, where are we at?
I was actually just listening in, and I actually do agree.
Josh is muted.
Sorry.
Even in the metaverse, you can still be muted.
Even in the metaverse, I can still be muted. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, funny enough, the one thing I actually did want to cover was the whole concept of like content and yeah, as Sam, you were mentioning, because as someone who actually has a younger sibling that was born around the 2010s, this is actually going to be normal for her. Yeah, for them
Mm.
having some form to be connected via the internet, not necessarily like back in the day. I usually really hate saying that word sometimes, but yeah, back in the day when you have to physically visit people and actually interact with them. These days, my sister just always actually connects with people via Roblox rather than
Yeah.
actually, yeah, and social media. So then the question then becomes how can you manage that? How well can you manage it? And exactly like how can you weed out the toxicity at least, or just ensure that that there's some form of indication that there's some there's gonna be toxic people. There's no lie that some in certain communities like toxicity will be is there to some degree, but it's more like how can you manage that? How well can you manage that?
Yeah, and I guess the thing is, if you look at the internet, like there are groups there that people belong to and can access pages and content that would go against probably all my values and ethics, and they're there available for
Mm,
people to access. And it's the same thing here. There's a platform here that's an open platform, and yes, we can create content, but so can everyone else.
mm,
And we weren't able to limit that on the internet, and maybe rightly so for certain, like how much of that do you want to kind of manage? But I guess also, does that mean, because of that, it means that you've got access to all this information, to a lot of hate speech and talk, and it's open for people to go in and join and look at, um, that will just transfer across into the space. Right now, there are no standards for this platform.
mm,
There are no standards in that instance, in that way, for the internet, without getting into some of the detail stuff. But as a content creator, what stops you from coming in and doing that? Creating a group that is, you know, um, discriminatory or, yeah, like incites hate, right now, I guess you can do that on the internet and fairly get away with it unless someone
mm,
calls you out or, um, and I guess that will carry on. And so I guess that's some of the things is while we have had decades of learning, we're also taking all of that with us, and there might not be new things looked at because the feeling or the understanding is that we've got an example of this happening here. We're just going to shift that across. And it's
mm,
interesting, actually. I think in our kind of in the last sort of few decades, and again, yeah, I'm the same as James in terms of I feel really old kind of saying this, but this is actually not as big a technology shift as I think a lot of people think. Like I think a lot of people think this is like a massive shift, but actually we are taking a lot of what's already there and moving it to a slightly different view. um so it's not that big a shift, but what does that mean? Like, do we then take all our mistakes with us and all those with us? Do we stop thinking about things that we needed to fix with the internet? And I feel very much, and there's a lot of talk about this online, is things are still broken on Facebook,
mm,
and we're going to carry all of that across into Meta, like without fixing it. What does that mean? Does that mean the internet doesn't ever get fixed and it stays there, and we're just going to carry that through? Again, sorry, it feels like, we keep going back down the serious thing, but it is an interesting thing. And as content creators, again, there's responsibility for us and the content that we create and how we can be inclusive, etc. But
mm,
there are still people and groups out there who will have their own point of view and create some of those content that that people want to see that we might not necessarily be okay with.
mm,
Just to swing away, I guess, from the doom and gloom a bit. I mean, people meeting each other online has been a thing for a long time.
Mm,
There are great, wonderful, healthy
mm,
communities there. And if people are, when you meet somebody online, and this is an experience that I was fortunate to have, and I know many of my friends have been able to have as well, is that when you get to know somebody really well, when you're playing games with them, when you're when you're cross-posting through their LinkedIn journal, when you're whatever, right? But as you get to know these people, I knew people online for years before I met them in person. And meeting them in person, it was like, oh, well, this is awesome. We just get to keep having it. Like, we literally just picked up the conversation we were having the other day. It's just because it's online doesn't mean it's not real. I think that's a really critical thing for people to remember, is that, and we got a lot of that out of, the fear of, there's the moral panic kind of stuff around, kids are only online. It's like, yeah, but if they're having wonderful, deep connections and making new friends there, is that any different than them doing it in person? Especially, with COVID restrictions happening and things like that. And so, as with all things, a balance is necessary. And figuring out what that balance is and how you and your families and your communities and your friends all kind of find that balance, that's an ongoing process. And I think one of the, if we come back to kind of the content creator side of things, the developer side of things, a lot of the opportunity and the responsibility is on what spaces, like what are you enabling within those spaces? And we talked about kind of the issues around, problematic behaviors and things like that. But by the same token, you can make really cool, super positive stuff happen. You've got those are awesome options. So I don't think that it's, as you say, the kids growing up right now in an environment with an enormous amount of immersive digital content, with tools, with phones, if they're in families that can afford those things, if they're in families that have access to those things, if they have access to games, if they happen to have a physical disability of any kind, where they can still participate in those things, right? So like, there's all the barriers to entry, but if we simplify and say, if we assume that the barriers, if we set the barriers to entry aside, which is a big friggin' thing to set aside, but if we put that to the side for a second, we look at it and say, okay, well, what is actually happening here? People are building communities. They're having great interactions. They're learning about each other. They're learning about each other without the barriers that the physical world naturally imposes. Okay, those are all super positive things. So I think that there's, there's lots of great stuff to happen. There's lots of great stuff happening, and as developers, it's like, how do we put our fingers in the scale towards, positive, equitable outcomes for people rather than negative ones?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think that's exactly it. Like, it's really easy sometimes to dwell on that negativity and kind of bring that up, because you kind of assume in the positive way we're going to be creating some of that stuff. And I guess this is where we go, what can we do? What can we do in this space that actually makes it a more positive, inclusive space? And James, I totally agree. I think the balance is the right word here, and making sure that balance. And I think I've just seen firsthand, someone who had their online community and essentially was let down by the online community. They thought they were a lot closer as friends were, and then realized that actually, when it came time to it, they were let down. But on the other hand, I think we had probably, James, you and I had probably spoken more through Slack and email than met in real life. And again, same thing. You build up that, that relationship, the rapport, and then you meet, and it just goes on from there. And that's great. That's awesome. And I think the thing is now I think we should, kind of talk about what can be done in the space, the amazing content that can be created, and what it means for game developers specifically to be able to have potentially another platform here for content. And what does that look like? What does that look like for your communities? How can you extend those communities out? It'd be really interesting to start exploring how we all can make the most of the space and drive some of that fun and entertainment online, into the metaverse essentially. And places like, I guess, if you think about Roblox and Minecraft and what, a lot of people are kind of doing within those spaces, are we creating our own spaces? Do you join into other spaces and create content for it? There's a whole lot of opportunities to kind of dive into.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And the most interesting thing about it, though, is that if you think about it, come to around the 2000s, I think in a way, the metaverse or the internet just created its own culture that is outside of the physical borders, creating their own languages and all those images. I mean, it wasn't until like the internet age where memes became an actual thing. And that's how we sometimes communicate through something like Twitter. It's entertaining for sure. And it's like you need to have some form of context to find it whether or not it's entertaining. And yeah, it's like I'm guessing in a way the metaverse, um, like you mentioned, that it is just like mm, just trying to find the right word for it. But it's not necessarily a massive leap. It really isn't a massive
No,
leap. It's just a step in a certain direction. Whether or
Well,
not
memes are
we, yeah,
memes are a cultural artifact, right?
yeah,
Like they're like, it's in the same, I guess that's what we were just talking about, where the communities online, those are cultures. Just because they're
mm,
online and
mm,
in 2D form or 3D form or whatever they are, those the cultures of those communities will generate they will generate cultural artifacts. And so memes are a cultural artifact. And as you say, you can't, there are memes that go by my feed that I'm like, I have no idea why that's funny. I don't know what's going on. Okay. And then there are others that it's like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense to me because I have the knowledge of that, where that meme comes from. And so whether it's memes or a particular type of art or music, or it's like when people get together, they form communities. The culture of those communities generates artifacts. Some of those artifacts are art. Some of those are code. Some of those are whatever. But yeah, it's if we all got together, it's like if we all are hanging out at the same park on a regular basis in the real world, and we are given a space to create. I mean, even how many people went to the beach as a kid and there was the like the log fort, right? Like somebody would build like a little hut out of logs and sticks and something, and it would start really small, and then if there was enough material around over like the summer, at least this was my experience in Vancouver Island growing up, over the summer, like that thing would become a mighty, like ridiculous house almost of just stuff stacked together. And then the weather would take it out, or the tide would come up extra high and wash it away because somebody put it down a little bit too low, and then you'd rebuild it again. And it's like that's a tiny little cultural artifact of a tiny little culture that existed only through that period of the summer break, and that scales through everything we do as people.
hmm, yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, I guess
I'd
what
be
is
interested to see, Josh. Sorry, I don't know the exact schedule, but I'd be interested to see what some of the people in here
yeah.
think.
That's what I was actually gonna say though. Since we already talked our ears out, I'm just gonna open up the forum now to everyone if they have what on their thoughts on the metaverse. Feel free to unmute yourselves now. Um, Also regarding the video feed, I'm not too sure if anyone wants to turn on theirs, but I'm gonna turn on mine. Let's see if it's still working. Sweet.
Firstly, I'm one of the developers who actually built the system. The reason some people can't get in is more my fault than anyone else's. So good luck to them. But I have 3 children. They're all pretty young, 5, 3, and 1. And I can tell you right now, even though I'm passionate about this project and about this metaverse change, this mega trend basically that I believe the metaverse is, I want to keep my kids away from it as long as possible because I want them to learn to interact as humans first. But I can reason as an adult that this platform is really useful because I can meet anywhere. We could rather than being in this building, which is what humans are used to meeting in, we could meet on Mars. We could meet in the Mariana Trench. We could meet anywhere, But kids first of all need to learn about real life first, and then they can begin to see the value of that. But also, like you said, they're susceptible to bullying or susceptible to using these things in negative ways. Even SMS. The number of kids who've been bullied on SMS is crazy. Yet you think surely it's not that. You think it'd be quite hard to get bullied on SMS. It's just a text message, but it's a big issue. So, just my 2 cents on the kids topic.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, right? I don't know if anyone, with Steve Jobs and actually him keeping his kids away from iPhone and iPads is, again, an anecdote I heard. But it is interesting when you're in this space and you can see some of it. Sometimes it scares you more so, And my son definitely has access to a lot of this, but we very firmly he's 7, so we've said no VR until he's older to be able to do it. And so I think it's interesting, but as James said, I think part of this and the communities we're building is because as adults, we've learnt those interactions, human face-to-face interactions. So I guess this is the thing is for the next generation going up, how we can make sure we still do that, but also allow them spaces like this to come and build those communities, but not forgetting that kind of real world, Did anyone else want to jump in with something?
Tell us your thoughts.
I find it interesting to think about how a metaverse style platform could be used so well for education for the same reason that Bram brought up about being able to be on Mars and the Mariana Trench. But there's this inherent risk that I think is distilled in the forefront of everybody's mind around what the negatives could be of that education experience and the opportunity there. And I think maybe there's a liability where you look at, it could be a really amazing opportunity to be able to bring a bunch of students into the Mariana Trench and learn about science down there. But that there's a liability that things could really go awry, like you guys were mentioning earlier around physical space in the metaverse and what that means and how that can equate to bullying.
I'd love to talk to that just very quickly. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt someone?
No.
Go for it.
I was just going to say, because I've just done an interview for a education publication, and it's really interesting. We work with the University of Auckland quite a bit, and I see both sides of this. And one is obviously the disparity in, technology and what people have access to. But on the other side, education, higher level education, is generally in itself not always accessible, to people, to everyone. And so you imagine what we might be able to open up to people, being able to be anywhere around the world, to be able to access higher learning, around the world from whatever university. I think there's an amazing opportunity there. And while we talked before about this disparity, maybe we can close some of those gaps if you were able to access that without having to physically go to a space or to necessarily spend certain amounts of money, and actually be limited by location. Like right now, you have to, up until kind of recently, I guess you have to come here to go to university, potentially stay close on campus. What does this all mean? And what does it mean in terms of wider world learning? You can access, an American university and so I just feel like the opportunities there are massive. But I guess the thing is also a lot of education is traditional. Their whole systems and everything has been built on a lot of tradition. And so how do they start looking at this? As it is, they're tracking behind in general. how do they start looking at the space and seeing it as an opportunity and get the right people on board to help them? One of the things I talked about was this inherent collaboration that's going to come out of this, because you need the right people on board to create these spaces. And in the short term, they won't have those people on board internally. So getting the right people on board to create that. But I think there's a ton of opportunity there that I think if you were able to give underprivileged kids or potential students access to some of this would open that up.
I think there's also, it's like the one of the big challenges for anyone to learn anything, right, is the ability to experience the thing. So like
Yes.
in school, I bounced really hard off physics. No pun intended. Really. But because like I couldn't, my brain could not make the connection between the formulas I was being asked to try to understand and use and the real world outcome of those things. I got a lot better. I never got good at physics, but I got a lot better at math when I started using them in the games and the creations that I was working on. Like when I could see the impact that it was having on the thing I was trying to build, you better believe I got a lot better at it and wanted to get in there. And being able to do things where like, oh yeah, I can run a physics simulation and I can edit that in real time, and now I understand why these formulas operate in this way. Like that stuff is huge, and I'm super excited about it. I think the ability to go down to the Marianas Trench and look at what are the creatures that are down there, what are the various like forms of life that you can actually see, what is the nature of the seabed floor. If I can touch that virtually, but if I can touch that, see that, understand that, if my teacher can take me on a tour of those spaces and explain to me what they are, I think the opportunities there are enormous. And the challenge there for developers is creating the tooling and the training to go along with those things. Like Sam says, there are literally hundreds or thousands of years of pedagogy that are set up to operate in certain ways. And we've all been in lectures kind of like this, maybe, where where like you've got everybody sat down and they're listening to somebody talk at them, and the degree of engagement is incredibly variable. It's driven largely by both the audience's interest in the topic at hand and the capabilities of the presenter, and so you could have somebody if you've got a teacher who is terrified of technology and you ask them to go and take a class at the bottom of Marianas Trench and this thing, and the tools are hard to use, it's going to be a bad experience for everyone.
Yeah.
So you've got to create an opportunity for success in this space by designing something awesome, by making it easy to use, by making it accessible. And then, I think you'll absolutely see stuff crack open. We've already seen the massive online courses, the MOOC stuff, right? Like, and there's lots of different universities around the world that have made their materials significantly more accessible online due to that. But I think taking it into, into immersive technologies, into game spaces, like with Unreal and Unity and whatnot, and then building out those tools so people can learn through experiencing. Yeah, that's going to be super cool. It already is super cool.
Sorry. Yeah, I just want to add to that. I mean, I made reference to this. We created a VR experience. Gosh, maybe 6 years ago now. Wow. Where it was for Unitech, and it was to showcase how hands-on learning that they do. You're more likely to retain the information. But it was really interesting because what we did is we took people in VR and put you into the learning environment. And I think there's this tendency for humans to just do a lot of things literally because of what they know, and not bagging space at all, but it is a literal version of what we would be doing in real life, and I guess this is the thing, is this VR, the metaverse, whatever, we can step outside of that. So one of the experiences we created was to learn biodiversity. Is we shrunk you down in VR, so you were the size of an ant, and so you're experiencing it from that point of view. And I think this is where we can get really interesting. And as game developers, we're in charge of creating beautiful worlds and taking that imagination out there. We can come in and create content like nothing else. What could this space look like? What else? And I guess that's the thing, is there's a lot we know, and so we take that across into our into other mediums, because this is how we know and this is how we act in this environment in real life. What would that look like if you change that up? You know, if we built new worlds and new spaces to engage with it. So you're right in there. You're not learning it like by standing in front of it, but you're within it. You know, for example, learning about the body and actually traveling through the body. So putting people into what might seem like totally impossible scenarios, you can do that. And I think that for education, you know, as James said, it's kind of that hands-on learning will make such a difference.
To that,
Of course.
I was recently talking to a mathematician friend of mine, and he's doing his PhD at the moment, and he explained maths as like comparable to like music. And the way that at the moment you learn maths is that they give you like music sheets at school, and you just look at sheets of like the notations of sheets. And it's not only like it's only when you go to university and actually learn the maths that you get to hear the music that it is. And it's kind of like this weird way that it was a shame, because there's so many people that must like see maths at school and only see this boring sheet of nonsense, where maybe they would love the music that like maths is, or any of these other subjects would be. It seems like yeah, I don't know. It seems like that's like the opportunities that you guys are talking about.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, look, education could open up a whole nother conversation, because there's inherently a lot wrong with how we learn and how kids learn and how much that has been shown and changed over time. We're still not there. Apologies, it's my dog. But again, what can people do in terms of collaborating to start opening that up? You know, we talked about the traditions, and it's all built on that. And there's very standard lecture theatre, someone talking at you scenario, and how that might change the future. I mean, I love that. I also did a presentation earlier this week to a class of 10 and 11-year-olds, and they wanted to know if there was maths involved in game development, you know, because they wanted to get into the space, but they're not sure if they want to continue with maths. And so it was like, yes, and this is how, and this is what you can do with it. It's fun. And you know, this is why if someone says, will you really need to do that later on? Yes, you will. And it's actually, if you can learn it in a different way, though, imagine if that was taught through coding, you know, like as you say with music, that's beautiful. How many more kids would have that access to learn, whereas the way we learn at the moment, or, you know, maybe when I was younger, a long time ago, very academic, right? It's set up for certain people to succeed. Josh, you probably have a time limit. I'm not sure, but if there were...
You actually do have a timer, yeah. Talk was supposed to last for an hour, but yeah. Does anyone else have any questions or have any comments about the metaverse? Because if not, I'll do some announcements real quick, and we can break.
I've got one more.
Yeah.
Just to go in the back.
Yeah.
I can remember reading or seeing somewhere that there was this idea that the internet you can relate the internet to being similar to biology, and the way that biology works, that like, I don't know, you put something in a petri dish and it slowly absorbs like the weaker, I don't know, not the weaker, but like you slowly have in nature, you absorb, and you basically become just one thing, like a singularity. And I wonder if you guys thought that that's just like inevitable with the internet, or I don't know, is that a dystopia, or
where everything becomes digital, or
it becomes like one company, I guess, or one.
Oh,
yeah,
something like that.
One
that's
yeah, basically.
That sounds like a horrible outcome. But I think there's a reason that gosh, I hate making natural world metaphors in relation to the business world, because they're very different spaces, right? Every time somebody starts throwing around notions of like what evolutionary fitness looks like in business space, I'm just want to start ripping my hair out. And that only happens if we let it happen, right? The thing about having multiple, like many companies involved in a space, many people, many creators, many communities, diversity creates strength and creates resilience. If things are a monoculture, they're no longer resilient, they are very fragile. And that fragility can be extended in almost any direction. So from my perspective, I feel like that would be a horrible outcome. And oh gosh, no, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now because it's a big one. But I guess the short version for me is that I also I just don't see it happening, right? Like that does tend to be a perspective, not a perspective, but it is a comment that when I see it go by, I often see it from the perspective of someone in a very it's often either an American or at the very least like certainly an affluent Western perspective. And meanwhile, there are thousands of companies, communities, people, developers in every other part of the world that we are completely unaware of, right? Like South Korea has got an incredible internet infrastructure with all these amazing things happening in it that is like we are mostly blind to because we don't interface with that world because we don't necessarily speak the language. And so, if you get to a place where you've got, great real-time translation and whatnot, that starts to open up those new worlds to you, but you're still not, getting in there. Yes, it is absolutely a massive misunderstanding of how evolution works. The other thing, oh gosh, I'm going to get off from the evolution thing, but the survival of the fittest thing is only one model of evolution and certainly not the only model, right? Like there are many, many, many angles within that. And there are many more that work around things like symbiosis and cooperation. And those are the types of models that I think are well worth looking at because they do tend to lead to, oh gosh, Neva, you're going to send me off course here, but you are absolutely right. Please go dig up the Darwin stuff. It's well worth watching. If I would give people two things I would really suggest having a look at. One being the work that Monica Bielskete is doing around protopian futures. And if you want to get like a really rapid deep dive on that, I think it's the most recent episode of the Voices of VR podcast with Kent Bai. She's on that. Would strongly recommend having a listen and having a look for the protopian futures framework that she's published that we can check a link up to. And the other book that I've been reading recently, and I think it was actually a recommendation of hers and a few other people have recommended to me, and I was just like, all right, it's one of those things where like my reading list is stupidly long. It's just like the list of games I have to play is silly long, but I have a vague heuristic, which is if like 4 or 5 people in a short order recommend the same thing to me, I'm like, that goes to the top of the list. And Sand Talk by Tyler Yonkaporta is incredible. And I'm only like 3/4 of the way through, and every single page and every single chapter, I've got stuff cracking my skull open. Strongly recommend getting in there because it is 100% about our world and our interactions with each other and our communities. And that's what we're sitting in, right? Like we are in this thing here is one more iteration of our community. And so it's all applicable. So yeah, if I was to leave you with 2 things to go and have a look at, here's your homework: Protopian Futures, Sand Talk.
I just want to add something. I did a workshop earlier today about diversity and inclusion, and it just feels really, I talked a bit about this idea that we have when running a studio of fitting to a culture, and all that creates is a homogenous studio. Everyone's the same, and I guess the thing is, as human beings, we embrace the diversity in others, and we like those differences, and it's about culture add, not we should start changing our terminology to culture add. What can people bring to that? How can we make it more diverse and inclusive? And I think that's again up to us as creators and other creators in the space to start exploring that, having the ability to do that. And hopefully that's becoming more and more, available to us. We have a lot of work to do. We definitely have a lot of work to do. But by opening that up, I think, yeah, I agree with James. I'd hate that. And it is interesting though at the same time, if you give social media as an example, how similar things start to look because of certain things. Instagram brought out stories, Facebook obviously had stories. LinkedIn brought out stories, and then Twitter's got live stories. And it's just really interesting how sometimes over time some of those things do start to look like each other. And how we can kind of add to that so they don't all become the same thing.
I made a mistake. It's Tyson Yokaporta, not Tyler. Not sure where I got that. My bad. Anyways, there's a link there. Sorry, Sam. Just was like, I need to correct the
all
record.
good.
Oops. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a very fair point, and I have not seen LinkedIn stories. I did not know even that LinkedIn even had a stories feature now.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, and then Twitter's got it now as well. So I just find that really fascinating. I'm like, okay, well, something's obviously working for someone, and they decided that it could work for them as well. I think LinkedIn, I'm not sure if they've taken it off, but it feels less prevalent now than it had done a few months ago. So maybe they decided it wasn't working for LinkedIn. I'm not sure. Maybe I just inadvertently turned it off at some point.
It is
Maybe.
entirely possible that you've been A/B tested into a group where you got the feature and other people didn't. That is a far too common occurrence. But well, I mean, anyways, here we go. Now we're going to get into optimization for user retention. Whoops.
Whoops. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone else want to have anything to add to for this chat? Yeah, did not actually know that social media platforms actually do that. I would have assumed they would have given you like some form of indication that, oh yeah, you're gonna get A/B tested to this feature.
Oh no, they totally
then
do
it's
that.
then it's not an A/B test.
Instagram did that whole thing, and they actually told people about it, which is really unusual. But the whole turning off likes, counts, and they initially tested that. Of course, yeah.
All right, yeah, that whole public thing, whether or not likes were actually detrimental to the users' well-being or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Seems like no one has to anything to add at the moment. Yeah, just very quickly, I'll actually go and jump for announcements. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, James, for your time and having a chat about the metaverse.
Kia ora.
Yeah.
Yeah, kia ora. Hopefully it was somewhat interesting and insightful.
It really was insightful.
We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And reading about Ready Player One, or reading and watching Ready Player One, wasn't really enough for it. Yeah. Cool. I'm just gonna be. Is everyone able to see my screen? Cool. Can anyone?
If I click on it, it gets bigger.
Did it? Yeah, it's only on the right
Yep.
side, so yeah.
Yeah, just click on the pip and it'll get bigger.
Yeah, I already did. Cool. So just a couple of announcements. In case you guys haven't heard, the NCGDA is making their board elections this time around. The votes were open sometime around last week and will be open until November 19th. You would get them on email if you want to have your vote and have your say on who's going to be elected in the board for 2022. Go to ncgda.com/join us, and they'll send you a form and ballot there. Another thing would be their AGM is going to happen in 2 weeks time, November 24th. They haven't posted any details on that, but they will send a Zoom link and an invite to you closer to the date. One other thing I need to mention. Oh, this is actually using the wrong date, but yeah. So Auckland Armageddon or Armageddon Expo has decided that because of what's happening and because of Parliament's decision for the COVID alert, the new COVID alert protection framework, they're postponing the date for Auckland Armageddon to, instead of November 26th to 28th, it's actually now December 17th to 19th. If you have a project or know anyone that wants to showcase their project, the NZGDA has a booth there at the ready for you guys, for you. The link is in this presentation, and I'll send over to chat for anyone that wants to showcase It's a nice opportunity for people to showcase their game, get some feedback, and meet new people. And I believe that's about it. Just a quick thanks for the NZGDA for thanks for the NZGDA for giving us the opportunity to host this meetup. Thank you to Reed and New Game Plus for Reed, Bram, and the whole staff of New Game Plus for giving us the chance to test out Odyssey. And yeah, if you have any questions or would like to follow us, we have our social media, and you can email us at aucklandgamedev@gmail.com. And with that, should be it.